Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is Karam Lakshman, CEO of Daba, a crypto-powered DePIN marketplace designed to deliver high-speed internet access where it's needed the most in India. So, hello, Karam. How you doing?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. How's it going?
Pretty good. So, what part of India are you in? Are you in Bengaluru, as they call it now?
Yes, we're in the southern part. We're in Bengaluru or Bangalore even.
Yes. Yeah. So as we were discussing before the show, I've been to India 4 times now. So I'm sort of familiar with the vibe there. And a lot of people a lot of people have not been. So you don't really appreciate how sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say the word chaotic, but I kind of feel like, to me, it's chaotic. India feels, right? Like it feels like there's no zoning laws. There's like building, church, house, cow, right? Like that's very India, right? And so the fact that a lot of people don't have Wi-Fi or broadband service, that may be an underappreciated fact. So do you think I have this right so far?
Yeah, I think you articulately hit the nail on the head absolutely correctly. Like, to give you a sense of sort of the scale and how that sort of happened is I was born and brought up here in Bangalore. And we were a small retirement town 25 years ago. Lovely weather. It used to be called the city of gardens and also the city of pubs. You would have mostly retirees that would sort of move here. In the last 20 years, I think the city's grown by a scale of maybe 10x or so. Right? I think we're nearing about 15 million people or something thereabouts. From a small town that you could walk end to end in about 20 minutes is now about 700 square kilometers. If you sort of zoom out on Google Maps. And so as a result, infrastructure like you described is growing pains is the best way to describe it. When you have that level of growth, you can't blame city officials. It's really hard to roll out good infrastructure as that mad level of growth happens. And so there's this giant gap, as you mentioned, in the difference of wireless to wired connectivity. So yeah, that's exactly the area that we fit in. That's exactly the opportunity that we have. And it's a great opportunity to scale.
So let's put some numbers on that, because I did some homework, did some reading on your site. So this is a quote: relative to its population, India lags behind most other countries in broadband penetration. So the United States has 112 million broadband connections, with roughly 300 to 400 million citizens. China has 612 million connections, but India has only 30 million. So that's quite the gap, right? So there's a lot of room for growth there. So let's get the big question out of the way, because I've spoken about you guys to a couple of my friends. Big question that comes up on everyone's mind is, how does Elon Musk and Starlink not just crush you guys? Like, what's your advantage versus them? Because I'm sure you get asked that a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And the simplest, straightforward answer is physics. So you can put as many satellites as you want up in space, but ultimately you're using radio waves to beam the internet down and back up. And because of the atmosphere and because of the way radio waves work, for millions of internet connections, you're never going to be able to give gigabit speeds because simply the technology doesn't allow that. So on a basic level of providing the kind of speeds that people expect today, Starlink is simply not going to be able to deliver. The second is, again, because of the sort of overlapping nature of the radio waves, Starlink can't serve a dense Indian city. It's just not possible. And so...
Wow, really? I didn't realize that. So they actually can't solve for India because of the density?
Yes, fundamentally. And the last and final thing is, because India is in this incredible sweet spot of sort of age, population, purchasing power, and that sort of thing, it is more economically feasible and cheaper for an Indian customer to get an unlimited gigabit fiber optical cable to their house than whatever Starlink could price at. Like, if you compare Starlink prices to what people are used to paying in India, I think there's about a 250x difference between what you would pay for an internet connection in India and what Starlink is charging. So I think for remote areas in India, there are plenty of those. We've got the Himalayas, we've got deserts, we've got everything. I think there's definitely room for Starlink to play. But when you look at the scale of the problem that we talked about earlier, which, cool, Starlink, do 10 million connections, do 20 million, do 50 million connections, right? And you still got 2% market share. So we want more Starlink, but they're in nowhere near competition.
Got it. So, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
And I just wanted to mention, we've had long chats with Starlink about this because some of the people in senior management at Starlink and that sort of thing are investors of ours. So we've had these conversations saying, hey, let's set out a couple of dozen terminals, run the system off of it. And we realized very quickly the systems are built for two different things. So on a very practical level, we know that Starlink sits adjacent to us in the market, but doesn't compete with us in any way.
Yeah, okay, I buy that. That's pretty impressive that you guys have some Starlink people as investors. That's fantastic. So I know that your company was founded in 2017, and you were backed by Y Combinator, and I think later by Multicoin Capital and Borderless Capital. Did you start off apparently you started off as a Y Combinator company? Did you start off as a crypto company though, or did that come later?
No, so we started off as a Web 2 company, very sort of clearly. And one of the things that we found, and I'm sure everybody knows this about the sort of telecom industry worldwide, is usually it's a monopoly in a country that controls the telecom infrastructure. Whether it's broadband or whether it's wireless, pretty much every country has one or two providers that sort of tightly control the market. And telecom is a business where when you're trying to roll out basic infrastructure, it's an expensive business. So when it came to raising money, although we had an incredible network and although we raised from YC and incredible angels and that sort of thing, it came down to, multiple companies, the big ones that you've heard of, offered to acquire us to expand networks into India and that sort of thing. But we really wanted to build out a system of our own. One of the things we ran into while raising capital was that everybody would tell us, look, you're going to get crushed. It's not even David versus Goliath. Like it's a microbe versus Goliath, Cool. I'll give you $100 million to build out your network. No problem. But your competitors will put in $10 billion, right? So although we had rolled out thousands of connections, we even powered Google Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi in India. We had a thriving network. It became very hard for us to raise capital despite being a profitable company and amazing metrics, simply because that's the sort of structural nature of this industry broadly worldwide. So two things happened at that time period. Because we were and one of the funny things at the time, and you have to remember this is 2017, before 4G even really was widely rolled out, was a lot of people would ask us, who needs Wi-Fi? Like, why does a small shopkeeper or someone driving a tuk-tuk or a security guard, like, what do they need Wi-Fi? It's just weird.
I mean, by 2017, we knew Wi-Fi was a thing, right?
But again, in India, the 30 million connections we have today is amazing, right? Back then, it was 6 million connections, right? Wow. So It was way worse, the situation. So we had this double whammy situation of where trying to raise capital would result in this, guys, you're going to get crushed. You're insane. Why are you doing this? But on the flip side, we would also have this sort of pessimistic argument going, do people really need data? Like they have 3G, they can get messages. They can live with that, right?
Yeah.
But the counter argument for us was our on-ground experience of day-to-day of running this network was wildly different from what people in air-conditioned, conference rooms would tell us as feedback and that sort of thing. And every single person in the company would get a call or an email or something like that pretty much every day going, hey, I love what you guys are doing. Can you bring it to my area? Do you have franchisees? Do you have anything like that? So we hit this point just about before COVID where we're like, okay, let's see if the public is willing to put their money where their mouth is, right? So we divided Bangalore into this grid of 100 cells. And we said, okay, you can help us subsidize the network infrastructure for this cell. And in return, you'll get sort of part of the revenue or sort of a reasonably franchisee sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And we were pricing that, I think, close to about $20,000 to $50,000 per region. But it sold out in a matter of a month. Right? People were just like, there was more demand for it than we knew what to do with. And all of the conversations of people that were interested in participating, building out this network, kept bringing up crypto and kept talking about this project called Helium. And at that point, we were solidly Web 2.
The reason I asked the question was because Helium started off Sorry, I was actually thinking of HiveMapper. HiveMapper started off being not a crypto company at all, and they found that, I won't get into it here, but they could not make their economics work without introducing crypto into the equation, at which point they exploded. And so I was wondering if you had, it sounds like you traversed a similar path.
Yeah, exactly the same journey. And so then I think somebody from Helium, or I can't remember how this sort of connection happened, but we ended up talking to the folks at Helium. And they were like, guys, we're solving the same problem in the same way. This is a scalable way of doing things. You can address a global audience. And, that's when this light bulb moment went off going, yeah, this is what the future of building out telecom infrastructure. And at that time, the word DePIN and that sort of thing was still getting coined. So, it was still unclear.
I didn't hear about it until last Christmas. That is literally the first time I heard of it. So maybe I was late to the party, but I'd like to think I pay attention to these things. And I just didn't, or maybe I heard it and it just didn't go in my head. But the first time it really sank in was Christmas of 2023. So yeah, relatively new word.
And so we then took the next sort of solid 12 to 18 months to work through the regulation, make sure we could do this, make sure we could do it in a manner that was safe and sustainable, because we're building out a network, and we hope to roll out hundreds of millions of connections over the next 20 years or so. So given that, we wanted to ensure that we had a stable base, good tokenomics, things along those lines. So we took our time, sort of designed the network, designed the tokenomics, put compliance in place and that sort of thing. And towards the end of next month, we hope to have our token generation event and actually launch our token. So that's sort of been our journey very organically from Web 2 to Web 3 over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So let's talk a little bit about the situation of local cable operators in India. So, I read your docs, and there's over 150,000, roughly 150,000 LCOs or local cable operators in India. And is that the same, or is that it sounds very highly fragmented to me versus the United States? Is that correct?
Yeah. So I would say you can classify, the world of telecom into two categories broadly. So one is you can take all the developed nations like the US, Europe, Australia, that sort of thing, where infrastructure has grown along with population growth, and the same monopoly providers have been doing a great job of providing connectivity to their entire market. Then if you look at the other sort of part of the world, which is the developing world, you still have one or two monopoly providers, but they only provide connectivity to a tiny slice of the market. They have a monopoly on sort of the middle class, upper middle class, right? And then the rest of the country, the remaining 90% of the people in that country don't have access whatsoever. So India is a lot like that, where we have one or two large telcos that serve the rich really well, but sort of ignore the rest of the population. But India's market is a unique snowflake in the way that, there's this concept of jugaad in India, right? Which is this idea of sort of fix it with duct tape, get it working, hustle, do whatever's necessary to solve the problem.
I love that. So, yeah, that sounds very India to me. Yes. I'm vibing with that.
And as a result, you have all of these. So we have at least 1,000 cities in India with a couple of 100,000 people each, right? Yeah. So you have a young person usually, and they've got a tiny business. Maybe they've got a tiny electrical shop where they fix mobile phones or TVs or something like that. And then they have a satellite dish antenna. And over the last decade, from that dish antenna, they've been distributing satellite TV to their neighborhood, right? So they have 300-400 subscribers and that sort of thing. That's your local cable operator, right? There are literally 100,000 of these that are serving tens of millions of satellite TV connections over the last decade. And every single one of these guys is transferring over to becoming a micro ISP. So what we want to do is take the sort of standardized playbook that you've seen in the Web 2 world of great companies. You've got Uber, you've got Airbnb, you've got all of these markets, right? And groups that organize a fragmented market, provide them the support, customer demand, and tools necessary to execute their business. And then you're able to grow an incredible ecosystem where not only is everybody enabling, but you're creating 1,000 micro entrepreneurs as well as that process goes on. So the reason we can do this is I think it's worth sort of diverging slightly for a moment and talking about how existing DePIN models work versus the sort of unique situation that Wi-Fi Dabba has and what we're doing. So most DePIN models are sort of supply-led. We'll roll out this network, and at some point, we'll figure out how to monetize this network by selling the data off the network or things along those lines. Whereas in India, demand for data is absolutely exploding, right? In the last 3 years alone, data consumption has roughly grown 2x year on year, and this year 100% is going to grow to 2x. Indian consumers already consume the most amount of data in the world, right? Because we have incredible 4G. We have this wild situation where we have the most competitive telecom market in the world where data rates are already the cheapest. So the average Indian consumes, 2 to 3 GB a day, no problem. On their phone, people are consuming 100 gigs a month, right? And that's a normal thing. And just to give you a sense of, to concretize in your mind what that consumption looks like, it's as simple as putting on the cricket match on YouTube and having it streaming all day, right? A cricket match goes on for 6.5 hours. So if you've got YouTube streaming 1440p on your latest smartphone for 6 hours, you've gone through 4 gigs in that one day, right? So just culturally, when you take our music and our sort of consumption of sports and this and that, we're just natural data consumers. And so you have this situation where all of these mobile networks are also choked because mobile networks have the same issues that a Starlink has. They're based on radio waves, and you can only jam pack the airwaves with so much radio. Beyond that, physics doesn't allow you to do that. So you have to roll out things like broadband networks. So now there's this crazy race that has started where the country is going to get wired up over the next decade or so, and you're going to have another 150, 200 million Indians come online with high-speed internet every 5 to 10 years for the next 30 years.
Wow. It sounds like it's a massive opportunity if you can become the dominant provider. You're right, it is. And you mentioned Uber, Airbnb, and DoorDash, either here or on your documents, I can't remember which, but that is the basic idea, is to take the hotspot operator. The hotspot operator is the Uber driver analogy in your universe. And so you want to basically empower and enable as many hotspot operators as you can, correct?
Yeah, and to sort of take that in a really practical way, just to take a step back. So the challenge that these local cable operators that we're empowering have is because they're super tiny businesses, their biggest problem in life is that additional amount of capital to roll out the next internet connection. Right? Because every new internet connection that they roll out, broadband connection to somebody's home, office, wherever, requires a little bit of money because you have to draw an optical cable to that person's house. It takes labor, there's the cost of the cable, that sort of thing. So, when you're a 20-something, 30-something guy in a small town and you've got this tiny business and you really want to expand it, it's hard for you to get that tiny amount of additional capital to expand your network. So the process that we're running is we bring all of these people onto a marketplace, and anyone anywhere else in the world can buy a hotspot and say, hey, I want to empower that guy to install and maintain my hotspot in somebody's house or office and that sort of thing. So you have this twofold system where you purchase the hotspot somewhere, but somebody else is doing the installation and management for you, and they bid for the rewards on a competitive basis. So LCOA will say, I've got a slightly more efficient process, so I'm going to charge you maybe 10% of your monthly rewards in order to install and maintain your network. Whereas LCO
by monthly
might be
rewards, you mean crypto rewards, correct?
crypto rewards, the Dabba token.
Yes.
So the way the token flows is you as the person that bought the hotspot get all of the tokens. You then in turn, on an ongoing basis, reward the local cable operator to continue maintaining your hotspot. And that way you also maintain a level of quality, because only if that person's doing a good job do you continue rewarding them with a share of tokens to maintain your hotspot.
Yeah, so let me try to. I actually read through your documents, so let me try to repeat back what you said. So I'm an aspiring hotspot operator. First thing I have to do is buy some hardware, which costs roughly $200. Then I have to get a 7-year lease from an LCO, which is a local cable operator. And then there's also another party called a backhaul operator, and I guess they're the ones who supply the uplink to the LCO. Is that correct?
Exactly 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So you've basically got two connectivity providers sort of at different levels of the connectivity. And then you have the location provider, which might be the coffee shop or whatever. Maybe it's the same person. So I think in a lot of instances, the hotspot operator and the, coffee shop will be the same. But that's a lot of money for someone in India to sort of get up and running if they're young. And so you want to help them out. You want to get them up and running. And if I'm a hotspot operator, with every month that passes, actually, let's go here for a second. So I get my hotspot up and running. People who are connecting to me, they don't pay in the token; they pay in fiat. Correct? So I'm getting paid in fiat cash. Okay.
Yeah, and so the one thing also to be clear is all customers on the network are paying customers. In India, people are willing to pay for access; they just can't afford that setup cost. So there are no free users on our network. All users are paid for, and we take that revenue and use it to burn the token.
Yes. So let's go to the token for a second. So there's a set amount. I was actually going to get to that later, so I got to find my notes here. How many tokens are there total?
So it's a maximum supply of 10 billion tokens that are emitted. So I think it's sort of worth taking a step back and approaching this from a perspective if you're familiar with helium. Right? I think that's like a cleanest way to sort of do a step-by-step sort of thing. So let's say that you bought a helium hotspot and you installed it in your house and you're really happy with the service. It worked out well. It's doing something useful. It's generally all good. It's hard for you to buy another helium hotspot and install that somewhere else because now you've got to convince a friend, go set it up. There's a separate wallet, that sort of thing, right? Whereas it would be cool if there was a service that was able to deploy, install, maintain, and manage for you. But additionally, in a market where people are going to use the product and pay for the product. So you would buy a hotspot and all of the token rewards would flow to you. Out of the 10 billion tokens, about 60% of the tokens go to the community altogether at any given moment. So there's a daily epoch and you get tokens every day. Then at the end of the month, you'll see that, this local cable operator has been running and installing and maintaining my hotspot. It's doing well. Data is consumed. Customer review is good. No customer complaints. And all of these metrics are available on our dashboard. So you can see everything that is happening with your hotspot. And you're like, okay, this guy's doing a good job. So he's charging, let's say, 3,000 tokens, just as a random number, 3,000 tokens a month to continue maintaining your hotspot. So from your rewards, you're going to pay him 3,000 tokens, and he'll continue maintaining your hotspot. If at any moment you feel like, hey, I'm not happy with this person's service, at the click of a button, you can set it up so that we will then switch that local cable provider, get your hotspot moved from that provider to another provider that does a better job. So in that chain, there's the local cable provider, the bandwidth provider, and at the beginning, and tiny initial amount of marketing reward that you would also put in to help that local provider just broadly expand the visibility of his business.
Okay, two questions. First one is, if I'm a hotspot operator, you said that I am paying my LCO and backhaul provider downstream from my rewards, my token rewards.
Yes.
Am I paying them in fiat also?
No, you are only paying them as a share of your tokens.
Got it. So there is no fiat payment to the LCOs.
So they get a tiny fraction of what the customer pays because certain services for them have to be paid in fiat. So for example, if you're a small local cable operator, you've got 2-3 friends, 2-3 small suppliers for your cables and things like that. You can't reward them in crypto. They have to pay in fiat. So let's assume that the average customer right now pays about $5 a month for the internet connection. So a small percentage of that $5 a month stays in fiat and goes to the local cable operator.
Okay. And then second question is the hardware is $200 roughly, or $199. Is there any assistance in getting that, or is that just what I have to scrabble together to sort of get to go to become a hotspot operator?
That's it. You just got to buy the hotspot and we handle everything from that point on for you. It's a fully managed service. The idea is to decouple the ownership of DePIN to where the actual hardware is being deployed, because that's what then accelerates the scale of DePIN. So I'll give you an example that's slightly thing. So one of the things that we noticed is all of the people that have bought hotspots and are participating on our network so far are also participants of other DePIN projects. So, for example, they might have a weather device or a noise sensor or something like that, right? Another DePIN project that's collecting weather data. They're able to now say, hey, since you guys are installing hotspots and that sort of thing all over the country, it takes 10 minutes for the LCO to install a weather device as well. So we're also going to enable people to be able to expand their portfolio of other DePIN projects that you're interested in. A way to look at it is this. I know we're going all over the place, but I want to crystallize this idea of modern telecom companies are going to look very different than what people are used to with current traditional telcos. Current traditional telcos are either anywhere in the world, doesn't matter anywhere, are either large business houses or large business families or politically affiliated in some format. They are rent-seeking bodies that are not there for innovation, or they're not technology companies, right? A large telecom provider today would buy its equipment from Nokia or Ericsson or somebody like that, and then they have an operations team that goes and rolls it out. Why this is important is it's ridiculous because let me ask you a simple question. Now you have sign in with Apple, sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, all of those things. It should have been sign in with AT&T from day one, right? Because they have your identity. There's a ton of services and interesting things that you can build on top of telcos if you were only a technology company to begin with. So a way to look at a DePIN project like us, and if we're going to roll out things like hotspots and provide connectivity, we might as well provide a layer of smart sensors and other things like that on top of this layer of connectivity. Because all of those things generate useful data that can then be monetized. And so your modern telco starts to look like something from the future where you're rolling out a network of smart devices, smart sensors, and that sort of thing. Like Accenture and all of these consulting companies and governments have been promising us smart cities for the last 20 years, and they've never resulted in anything. Yeah. This is what smart city is going to roll out, where it's going to be DePIN, crypto, and an array of sensors and devices that get installed everywhere. And all of that infrastructure is going to be owned by everybody. So,
yeah, I feel you totally on that. So the future of physical infrastructure networks will no longer be fat bureaucracies that are sort of top-down pyramids with layers of middle management that isn't really doing anything, with calcified policies and no real innovation. It's going to be a bunch of little atomic units all coordinating with each other, and the atomic units that aren't performing are going to get kicked out of the system, and the atomic units that are performing and want to hustle can get bigger and sort of build little mini empires inside of your empire. And there is no middle management; it's very flat. Because it's just like this peer-to-peer network where everyone's interacting and you're just sort of helping them coordinate with each other, not really being the top-down coordinator. So that sounds way more efficient.
I think people also underestimate the longevity of this. Like, think about your broadband connection at home. That's not going away for the next 30 years, right? As long as we provide a good service, the stickiness of this infrastructure is on a decade level. So I think that's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, that sounds really. This is a great idea, dude. The more I listen, the more I like it. So let's go to the token for a second because I want to make sure I understand that. So 10 billion is the total supply. You're going to launch it on Solana. We haven't actually said that yet. So it's a Solana token, right? Does that change? That's the same. Okay.
Yes.
And so Q3 of this year. So coming up pretty soon. And you are continuously burning. Well, there's token emissions. So that's generating new tokens, but never more than 10 billion. But you're also consuming tokens and burning them in order to run the system. So as end user customers pay hotspot operators in fiat, the hotspot operators are required to burn your token in order to give data credits to the user once you take the fiat. So so basically there's a continuous burn mechanism, and those tokens go away forever. It's like if you were burning Bitcoin as it was being emitted, maybe not at the same rate, but there's something destroying tokens, right? As this thing gets on, and there's the data credit rate is set to 1 cent per gigabyte, correct?
Yes,
so
it is.
Okay. Now, what is a DC? I was a little bit confused with what DBT is versus DC. Why do you have, is data credit a different coin or is that something else?
Yeah, so data credit is a concept that's entirely off chain.
Okay.
And the reason it exists is think from the end customer's perspective, right? The person actually using the internet. It's complicated for them if you tell them, hey, today the price of 1 GB of data is 1 DBT. And if the DBT appreciates in value, you're going to tell them tomorrow the price for 1 GB of data is now zero 0.9 DBT. Right? So it's really confusing to the end customer if it's a moving target in their head to figure out what does this cost. So the data credit is a fixed concept where it's always going to be 1 cent per 1 GB. And the number of data credits represent the amount of DBT that would have to be bought and burned. So it's just sort of an intermediary that stabilizes it from the customer's perspective, but doesn't actually change the impact of the token. It just allows you to translate it in a way that keeps it simple for the customer and still provides the exact same amount of value when burning the Dabba token. It's a system that we were inspired by the way that Helium did it, and it works really well. They run it across their IoT network and Helium Mobile, and it's a good system.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And
So it's like a stable gigabyte.
exactly.
Yeah. So,
And
yeah.
one of the things I wanted to point out is the rate at which burn happens is going to dramatically increase as each hotspot comes online. Because two things happen, right? One is, unlike a supply-led system where you have a new hotspot that comes online, which sort of drops the amount of rewards that each person is getting because this new hotspot has come, and demand for data doesn't really change. Whereas in the Dabba system, as soon as a new hotspot is installed, yes, each person is getting fewer tokens, but this hotspot is now generating revenue and generating burn. So the value of everyone's tokens goes up. And the more hotspots that get rolled out, the greater the value of the token will rise because the greater the burn rate. The second thing that happens that sort of pours fuel on that fire is, I don't think Zuckerberg coined this law, but somebody did a couple of years ago, where the amount of data that people consume roughly follows Moore's law. So if you consumed, 50 gigabytes a month last year, this year, 100% you are on track to consume 55%, like 55 gigs, right? And so as a result, just because quite literally of the network effect, the more people that are connected, the more content that's created, the more everything that's created, the more data. So with every hotspot that we roll out, rate of burn goes up. This is going to be exponentially better. And a really interesting question then becomes, at some point, you're going to have a system where the burn rate is good enough where even if you don't sell one more new hotspot, the system generates enough burn and revenue to continuously roll out more hotspots on its own. And that becomes a crazy multiplier for anybody that bought a hotspot early on, because now they're getting this additional value of the network growing without them having to buy further hotspots or inject further capital. And this number, because we've got a good stable system, is fairly low. At about 150,000 hotspots, you're just going to see a vertical climb happen on every single metric across the network.
Wow. Yeah. So it'd be like if the early Uber drivers, if they were rewarded in a similar fashion, right? They would have all been multi-millionaires. Instead, they got no the IPO, the money, the value that was created by the network went largely to the VCs and the management team. It did not go to the drivers, right? So yet the drivers were the ones who actually built the thing, really, when you get right down to it. So this is a way to reward the people who are actually providing the bulk of the value in your network in an equitable fashion. So this is fantastic. And 6 billion tokens are emitted for hotspot owners as rewards, and that decays 10% every year. So it's sort of like a halvening, except it's like a 10% inning every year, right? Sort of that kind of dynamic. So there's less tokens going out there, right? So
yeah, and so the reasoning for this is sort of twofold. One of the other problems that you see with supply-led projects is So you have this continuous supply of tokens that's just continually diluting things, and there's nothing that's burning them or consuming them, right? So the first thing that you want to do is have a rate of inflation that you can sort of achieve with your rate of growth. So take it on broad economic terms, right? If the rate of inflation in the economy is at 9%, you also want the rate of production and efficiency to improve by about 18 to 20% year on year. So you start dropping that. So we see that a healthy target is if you sort of double the size of the network every year, year on year, very quickly within year 5, you'll get to a situation where consumption vastly outnumbers the supply that's coming in. And so value accrual is really high. And the second reason is you want to sort of have an inflation level of 10% every year. Because if you look at what we are attempting to do, it is going to take a decade to 2 decades to roll out hundreds of millions of connections, right? And that's at the fastest rate that you can do it. So you want to have a system where there's enough tokens over that course of that decade to satisfy existing customers and new people coming into the system.
That makes sense. So how do we know? So first of all, where will this token be traded? I guess a Solana DEX, like when at token generation event. Is that?
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be on a DEX. We're looking at a couple of launch pads that we're talking to sort of kickstart things off. Jupe, for example, being one of them. And we're taking a very slow and steady approach because, as I said, look, we're in it for the next 10 to 15 years. We've already been doing this for about 8 years now. So we've got a long-term view on this to begin with, right? We're not expecting results tomorrow. So you want to have a good reputation built up. You want good trading volume. You want to do all of those things before you go to a centralized exchange. So we want to do a DEX to begin with. The second thing is we're also very comfortable with doing a DEX because we as a project have not done any random airdrops or any sort of garbage giving away of tokens. The only people that have received tokens so far are people that actually own hotspots during the Genesis sort of testnet period that we've had over the last 6 months. So we hope to launch our token, and we don't believe we're going to have a situation where people are just dumping on it because, they got the tokens, they farmed it on an airdrop or anything like that. So everyone that's in the community understands and is willing to take a slightly more long-term perspective because, we're trying to build something serious and sustainable and meaningful over here.
Yeah, they get skin in the game. It's to their advantage to hodl and to, keep growing the network and make sure that those tokens are regarded as precious and rare and not easily obtainable. So that makes sense. If I was a hotspot operator, I wouldn't sell either. I would just keep building out more customers. That would be my goal, right? So unlike Uber driving, where you can only drive one car at a time, you can operate multiple hotspots and build yourself a little empire once you get up and running and understand what's going on here. So yeah, I imagine you're going to have some of those people. You probably already have them. How many hotspot operators are there right now?
So right now we've onboarded only about 3 or 4. We're taking it sort of one step at a time.
Yeah.
You'll see a dramatic acceleration over the next 6 months because right now we're in the process of ironing out all of those small operational details. Like I want you to think about the experience that we want to deliver to customers, again, coming from this perspective of we're not a traditional telco, we're a software company, right? So you want to deliver that killer experience where so you know how like when you order something from DoorDash, right? You can see the rider come from wherever they are. You can see them on the map and that sort of thing. So we're putting in place tools like that where every couple of minutes, every hotspot on our network pings to our central server. And if a hotspot goes down, we know before the customer that the hotspot went down. Right? And then we're able to show you on our app saying, look, a technician has been dispatched. Here's exactly where they are. They will be at your place in 3 minutes and your problem will be resolved, right? So we want to provide that smoothness of experience. So those tools are getting finished out. It'll take another couple of weeks. So that's why it's a limited pool of our partners that we're running with this. The moment that refinement happens, which I think is a month or two, it's going to dramatically expand. And even to onboard our LCO partners, there's an exercise of quality control over here, right? LCO partners are only let in with referrals. So someone in our existing network has to vouch for a new partner that's coming in. They need to have at least a couple of hundred subscribers over the last couple of years. So they know that, so we know they're not an overnight fly-by-night operation. We do a customer survey to make sure, yes, have you been providing good service? Are you actually? So like those operational details are sort of getting finished out, and you're going to see a dramatic, like we're already in 2 cities, and I think by the end of the year, you'll see us at least in 20 or 30 cities.
Wow. And I say only in India, so I can't do this here in LA, unfortunately. So, but I probably don't need it.
Coming soon.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So, a way to look at it is like one of our guiding things is that Jay-Z song Empire State of Mind. Like if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah.
In India is the most competitive market. If you can make it in India with our sort of low cost cutthroat competition, you can do this anywhere. And so we, keeping with the theme of like we get ISPs and operators from Indonesia, from parts of Africa, South America, sort of mailing us or reaching out to us on, Twitter or LinkedIn going, hey, how's this working? Can you guys bring this up? So our definite goal is to expand to as many markets as possible. But rule number 1, refine everything here. And then we can ship it with a concept that we call ISP in a box, right? If you're an operator sitting, let's say in South Sudan or someplace, right? We should be able to send you a shipping container with all the hardware and all the software, and you should be able to connect your city, town, village in a couple of weeks with 0 effort. So we're gearing up to that.
Wow, it's big vision, dude. I like it. So tell me, who are you guys? What is your background, and how big is your team?
Sure, yeah. So there are 2 co-founders to Dabba, Shubhendu and myself. Shubs and I have been working together for the last 15 years. Prior to Dabba, we used to run a software logistics company that built logistics software for high-value goods. So we're really good at the nuts and bolts of building operational software and knowing how to organize teams and that sort of that. So we successfully sold our first startup. And the reason that we did was in our logistics journey, one of the pieces that we had to build was a piece of hardware that sat in trucks. So the companies that we provided our services to did only high value cargo. So it was like the movies, they only do cash, gold, human organs, things like that. So all our customers would have armored vehicles, armored guards. There's no such thing as a lost package, right? It's not Amazon. You can't say, whoops, I delivered a ton of gold to the wrong place, right? So we spent a lot of time building these secure systems. And one of the things we had to do was build a communications device that sat in these armored trucks and would collate data from all of the sensors together and, transmit it out to central headquarters. That's when we realized there was a connectivity problem in India. And, we started building Wi-Fi routers. And then we did this natural transition to, hey, we want to do a product company. And, we think this is something that we can do. Since then, we've helped craft the policy for Indian telecom for Wi-Fi. And I'll jump into detail of that at some point. But we now have a long history of working with the regulator. We're a licensed internet service provider. As mentioned, we help power Google Wi-Fi. We've installed Wi-Fi and hotspots in every kind of environment you can think of. Homes, offices, parking lots, markets, even historical monument. You name it, we've installed it. We're a team of about 25 people. We've all been working together for the last couple of years. So we're tightly knit and have been through thick and thin together. And yeah, now we think we're ready. We know how to scale. We know how to do this.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been battle hardened and you know each other and you're a team. You're like the Avengers. You've got you know who Hulk is. You know what he does. You know what he's good at. You know what he's not good at. Right, so it's good. It's this sounds fantastic. So how much? And so you guys started this in 2017. How much did you raise? And have you had successive rounds of funding? What does that look like?
So we've only done 2 rounds of funding, both at a small seed level. The great thing about our project is that because we have revenue coming in, it's extraordinarily sustainable and profitable. And because we're taking the DePIN approach, we don't need to raise that much money in order to scale the network. So we've been very careful with who we have raised money from, which is why we've got Y Combinator, we've got Multicoin Capital, we've got Borderless Capital, and pretty much every major crypto project that the founder of that project is an investor of ours. So we've been very careful with the low amount of capital that we've taken, but from people that can help us scale and use that capital really efficiently.
Wow, good answer, man. I think this feels like you have a bright future. So congratulations on all of the on all the success so far, and big wishes for continued success later. What else? What have I not asked that you think I should have asked? Anything?
No, I think we've done a great. I deeply appreciate the homework that you put in and all of the stuff that we talked about. I think that covers the major things. The one thing, of course, that I'd love to recommend to anybody that's watching this is please check out our Exploder. Season 2 of our hotspot sales have started, so we're aiming to sell 10,000 hotspots very quickly over the next couple of weeks. We've sold a couple of thousand already. If this is interesting to you, please check out our project. We would appreciate your support. We think this is something worth taking a serious look at.
And where can people find you on Twitter, and what are the websites? I mean, obviously Dabba.com is right behind you. So what about Twitter, and whatever anything you want to plug? Go ahead.
So please consider joining our Discord. We've got a great community. Definitely check out our Explorer. You're going to see a lot of cool Web3 features, tasks, quests, other ways to participate that are coming in soon. To find us on Twitter or X, the best way is Dabba.com. At the footer, you'll see links to our Twitter and that sort of thing. Please follow us there. We have now. So one of the interesting things is, so we were at Consensus, right? And
I heard about that just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and we had a crazy response, right? We had 1,000 people come by our booth, and I think unofficially we got voted the best booth in the conference, like at least 150 people a day. They loved the idea of the chai stall, so we're slowly starting to build that sort of brand imagery out. It's working out really well. We'd love to have you part of the project. So please check us out at Dabba.com.
Super cool. All right. Well, Karam, thank you so much, and wish you all the best of luck. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This has been Hash Rate. We'll see you all next time.